Hey, how do you lead with purpose, market with heart, and still sleep at night with all this AI hype flying around? In this episode today, I sit down with Lee Gilbert, CMO of Nourish, and one of the most refreshing real voices in marketing today. We'll be talking about personal branding and why marketers are not very good at it, empathy in leadership, getting unstuck, and how to embrace AI without becoming a robot. We also get into visibility, identity, and what it actually feels like to show up fully at work, especially when you're so used to being the one behind the scenes. I'm Tanya Kent, host and founder of Shoes of CMO. Let's lace up and jump in. Welcome, Lee. Thank you for joining the show today. And I just want to get the ball rolling with some quick fire questions. If you could just answer the first thing that pops into your mind.
Yep. It's a
Thank you
pleasure to be here, Tanya. So thank you for inviting me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm really honored to have you on the show. Yeah, I'm super excited. As you can see, all I want to do is ask you lots of questions, just jump straight in. So yes, and this is your stage. So I'm going to dish out some questions, and then the floor is yours. So first question, what's something that made you smile this week?
Something that made me smile this week. Wow, that's a really great question. I mean, something that made me smile this week was my youngest child who has autism. He responded to a WhatsApp message with some really amazing sarcastic humor, which is developing in him. And every time he does it, it just illuminates me, but also others around him. And I just love the way he's now just starting to grasp sarcasm in his language, and that's developing in his personality.
Oh, that's lovely. It's always, also as a parent, as soon as your kid develops in a certain way, or you see certain little things, you just, I always almost feel like, oh, I've got to control my peacocking moment here because this is so cool. I get so excited and overwhelmed because you're like, oh, that's a great milestone. Next one. What's your go-to shoe for a busy work day?
My go-to shoe for a busy work day? Well, I think it depends on whether the work day is in the office or whether it's out in a networking event or on a stage or something. So if it's in the office, my go-to shoe would generally be something super comfy, something I can walk not only to the office and back again in really easily, but I can also just show energy around the office and not have to really worry about how my feet might be feeling. So it would probably be a pair of one of my many pairs of funky trainers that I do own. But if it was in a more staged environment or a formal environment, it would probably be something that I'm known for, which is to wear a standout pair of shoes, which are either bright or particularly striking. I like to make the shoes the hero of every outfit I wear.
Well, that's awesome. I love that. I'm not a big heels person because I have no sense of balance, but I do love a good trainer, and I do like a sparkly trainer. Thank you. So if this season of your work life had a title, like a Netflix show or a book, what would it be called?
Something like Journey to Impact, I think.
I like that.
I always think that everything we're doing is a journey. It's not something that's constant. I think it's something that's you're always striving to achieve or make something bigger, better, bolder, faster, more. But where I'm driven from is from an impact perspective, particularly a social impact, not necessarily a financial one, but something that makes a difference either to the lives of others or makes a difference to society or to culture. So I think it would be something like Journey to Impact.
Really like that. That's quite deep for a quick fire question, but thank you. So on to something a bit more juicy and meaty. If we had to strip away your title, your team, the brand, what would remain at your core as a marketer?
That's a great question, because I think sometimes marketers do rely a lot on the brand that they represent as a safe space, their title, for whether that's influence or whether that's recognition or whatever it may well be. I think if I wasn't a marketer and my title was taken away from me and the brands that I've represented and represent today, the one thing will always remain is my sense of self and my personal brand. I've always valued a lot of building my personal brand, not not just the brands that I'm working with. I think marketers generally are pretty poor at marketing themselves. They're great at marketing other services, other products, other businesses, but when it comes to marketing themselves, they're really, really poor. And one thing that I always push other marketers to do is to build their personal brand and to increase their visibility, increase their voice across the business, across the market, and really drive that. I guess the other thing, if you took away the fact that I was a marketer, what you'd also find is that I'm quite entrepreneurial at heart. And so I was speaking earlier, we were talking about impact, and the idea of impact is something that drives me, but I like to think about that in a very entrepreneurial way. Um, and the other thing I would say is I get really bored really easily. So the one thing that, if you strip everything away from me, it would be someone that is just almost like a Tasmanian devil type character striving to just do something in the world, whether I was a marketer or not. And I think that's how I like to see myself, rather than just seeing myself as a marketer. That is how I see myself generally.
So I found it quite interesting that you tapped into the marketers are really poor at marketing themselves and building their own personal brand. Why do you think, and why do you encourage people to do that? For you, why is that such an important thing outside of, this is what I do as my day job?
I think there's two things. I think if I'm encouraging marketers to do it, it's really a mentoring and leadership perspective from me, so that I can build that confidence in marketers that I've worked with and work with now. They tend not to be very good at it. It tends to allow them to improve their influence. Personal brand is one of those things that voice and visibility is really key. Cannot do that just because you have a certain job or you work in a certain function in the business. And if you want to be influential outside of the business you operate in, but have an impact and a voice in the sector and space of which you operate in, and therefore you have an elevation in your authority, your credibility, and your overall state of getting things done, then brand is key. But I do also push it in anybody that's willing to listen. So when I'm working with or in conversations with people in sales teams, in operations, in finance, in people and culture teams, I think everyone needs to build their personal brand to some way, because it helps you stand out. And to be outstanding, you have to stand out. And if you want your voice to be heard, one of the critical foundations of allowing and creating that to happen is your personal brand. And therefore, it's a big pillar of success.
So I worked in a team, in many teams, but that really resonates with me, because I'm not a wallflower or somebody that sits quiet, but I know a lot of people in marketing that, funny enough, can be very quiet. They do excellent, excellent work, but they present it very quietly, or I'll let the work do the talking for me. Do you feel that? I personally don't feel like that's often enough, because people don't actually see or almost acknowledge how much work that person has done. And I personally feel it's not enough to just let the work talk for itself. How do you feel about letting the work talk for itself? I mean, the work is great. I have to say the work from these people is far better than anything that I could ever deliver on, because they are just sitting there quietly, meticulously doing amazing work, but not getting the recognition they deserve for that work.
It's all about value, and the perception of value is often muted if you just let the work talk for itself.
Mm.
And equally, it's a little bit like, you can be the best kept secret in any organization, in any team, in any space. You could have written the best work, but unless you've got a great machine around that, then it doesn't really work. Let's just put it into a context for a moment. If you think about people that create in consumer spaces for a living, and let's just think about this in an everyday sense. If you're someone that is written a book, or if you're someone that is featuring in a TV series, or you're featured in a film, just writing that book, just being in that TV program, just being a cast member in that film doesn't make that film, TV series, or book successful, famous, or achieve any ratings in a chart. What does is the promotion.
Yeah.
And there's lots of things with you take it to books. You might write 100,000 words to write a book, but you'll need to write 1 million to promote it. You might take 2 months to create a TV program or to create a movie, but you'll spend at least that, if not double that, promoting it. And I think if you take that context into your own personal brand, you can't just rely on the act of doing something to gain recognition. You can't just rely on the act of creating really great stuff that sets you apart from everyone else. And one of the things that does happen a lot with marketers is they are quiet, considerate characters generally, super well organized, super diligent, super high standards. But when it comes down to taking the credit for things, it's an area of weakness and it's a vacuum. And as I say to people, unless you fill the space, someone will take that space from you.
I agree. I've seen it happen time and time again. It's almost heartbreaking. And I think that, but also that I think equally that comes with leadership. If you're a good leader and you can see those quiet people diligently sitting there, meticulously doing all the work, I think as a good leader, I feel it's almost your job to pull that person forward and give them a stage to promote their work. Because, to your point, is often the loud one in the team that will then steal the spotlight and hasn't necessarily done the work as much as what the other person has done. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's just a follow-up to that. I think it's not always about the work itself. And I go back to where I started my response, which is around value. I think one of the things that marketers need to do more of in those spaces is to communicate the true sense of value of the work that they've done. Because quite often the value of the work is underplayed. It's seen as a cog in a machine. It's seen as a step along a journey. But quite frankly, if you've done, whether it's market research, you've built a campaign, whether you've spent ages doing content creation, whatever it might well be, there's always a strong lever from that to the end result, and the ability to translate how you're impacting on that and to demonstrate the value that you're bringing to the end result, not just that moment in time, is such a key part of that.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about, that it's almost like, what is the ROI of your work? And you have to tell people what that is. Otherwise, they just, again, to your point, don't understand the value of your work. And yeah, and I mean, I have seen it time and time again where, people have spent months creating a campaign and building out hundreds of versions of this campaign. It might do well or might not do that well, but because they almost haven't shown the depth of the work that's gone into it and shown that value, explained the value and the outcome of it, it's fallen flat in terms of leadership and understanding of the greater org. What's something you believed early in your marketing career that you no longer believe now?
This is an interesting one. So let me tell you a story.
Love a story.
I started my career in HR and training. So I started my career in a completely different space, working for a business selling pensions and doing sales training, IT training, and customer service training, and then doing some HR work. I got annoyed and bored, which I'm prone to do. And one day I resigned with nothing to do. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a job to go to. I didn't have a plan. But the next day, the next day I started a business. I ran that business for 15 years, which was an agency. And now that agency started in the era when the likes of AOL and FreeServe and other internet service providers were putting CD-ROMs through letterboxes on a Friday morning, together with takeaway menus and other things that would land crashing on your doormat. So if you wind your mind back to that era, I started a business which was a digital marketing business, and it was a business that was looking at web at that point. But obviously this was pre-Google, pre-Facebook, pre-MySpace. If you can wind your mind back that far, that was where we were at. Pre-broadband. 56K squealing modems. So in that time, I believed passionately that we were on a key inflection point in marketing and in business, and that digital was going to take over the world. The web was going to be the big thing. I ran a business which started out as a web agency and then latterly did digital marketing and everything else. I genuinely believe that marketing was going to change in far greater ways than it has. So that digital would drive everything, and that would mean that web, that video, that apps latterly, and maybe even democratized television as we've now got for advertising would be the entire future. And what that would mean was traditional marketing, copywriting, events, and other toolkit items that marketers had up until that point would die off. Now, funnily enough, at the moment, we're now in a bit of a similar inflection point when we're starting to think about AI, right? You're starting to think about AI is going to be the next thing, and everything else is going to die off. But I was wrong. And today, as a marketer, I really value a lot of the traditional levers. Digital is part of the game. It's not the whole game. I think it's right that digital is a big part, and it will always be a big part. But in some markets, it's less of a lever than it is in others. And it's often overplayed and overinvested in a lot of businesses I've dropped in as a consultant and other things over the years. And so I started out with that fixed belief that was where the world was going, and I was completely wrong. And where I'm at today is investing more in offline marketing than I am in online marketing, in use of marketing budget, because I'm tracking really clearly the levers that we're trying to create. And that's not just about direct attribution ROI, because that can be a bit of a rabbit hole. It's also about when you're trying to build a brand, doing that exclusively on digital is extremely difficult
and competitive.
Exactly. So I think we can all get to inflection points, but I definitely rode that belief for a while, and I got out of that after 15 years, and then started to do some other things. I don't regret it, but I was definitely wrong.
So I'm a big fan of bulky mail. I call it bulky mail. And bulky mail is obviously just, well, it's not obvious. It's getting something through the post that's not just a normal letter, but it's bulky. And the open rate on bulky mail is 95%. I mean, no email campaign would ever really deliver that, right?
It wouldn't. I mean, if you flip that coin and just go back to the time I was describing at the start of my story a moment ago, of course, the opposite was true. Everyone was getting letters through their mailbox at the time when FreeServe and AOL were dropping those CD-ROMs in, and those CD-ROMs gave you the ability to cut through that noise and actually deliver an email, which did have at that time a good open rate. But today it's completely different. So now I'm working on campaigns with handwritten letters. I'm working on campaigns with other items included, ride-alongs, as we used to call them years and years ago in a campaign, which was a lumpy mail inclusion. And I think as a marketer, you do need to think outside of the box and challenge your own assumptions and the assumptions of others, to just question, go back to first principles. What are we trying to get to? What are we building? And what problem do we need to solve? And then think about the best way to go and do that. Just because you've done it one way for years doesn't always mean it's going to continue to work or is the right way now.
To your point, appetites and marketing strategies change all the time. In those days, sending bulk email might not have actually worked as well as what it would work now. I recently did a campaign with a company. They're a cleaning company, and all we did was send 5 pence cleaning cloths. The amount of calls they got off that, or 5 pence cleaning cloths, it was phenomenal. And these things sit around, right? So they sit around for up to 2 weeks, these things. So, I think mail and those kind of things, they're not done and dusted anymore. And to your point, I think people need to really sit down and think outside of the box nowadays, because I do find digital is so overcrowded and so expensive. Unless you've got a big, massive pipeline and you can just spank up a lot of money on it, I think you've got to be clever.
You do have to be clever, and you have to think about multi-channel, because of course doing something with direct mail, lumpy mail, and then complementing that with outbound follow-up and other social noise around that, and all of those things conjoined will get a far better result than doing the one thing on their own. But equally, people, particularly younger marketers, are coming into marketing these days a lot with growing up through like the TikTok era and social media, and so they're coming at marketing through that digital lens. So one of the things I'm spending a lot of my time doing is is challenging their assumptions about what they see others doing, because just because you could see a great TikTok campaign somewhere doesn't mean it's the only thing you can do. Just because you see something amazing going on an email campaign doesn't mean it's the right tool in the tool bag to get the result for the problem you're trying to solve. Sometimes thinking through those same boxes and those same filters is just a dangerous place to be. So, yeah, I always advocate strip everything back and work from the problem as a first principle. It may not be what you were doing last month that's the right thing to do now.
And when you say work on the problem, you mean the client's problem, right? What is the client's problem?
What is the problem, or what is the problem that they're trying to solve for their customer?
Oh, well, thank you. On to something a little bit more different. One of the things I really care about on this podcast is giving space for the full human behind the job title. So forget about the job title being CMO, but I want to understand you as a person and give you floor as a person. And I know this might be more personal one, so feel free to share as much or as little as you'd like. But what's it been like for you navigating day-to-day work life as a trans person in leadership?
Really great question. I'm fortunate. It's confidence prior to transition that I was able to carry into my transition. Now, not every trans person that you meet had or was particularly gifted with confidence or created a lot of self-confidence and belief, whereas I was very fortunate to have that. So that allowed me to really push and to use my voice as a leader to advocate for other people. But it has been an interesting journey because not only have I been dealing with advocating for marketing, which is often one of the functions in a business that is sometimes not regarded as important as perhaps other commercial parts of the business, or those that are manufacturing, or if it's a tech business creating product, and therefore being on the back foot of putting myself authentically in a way that works for who I am, but also allowing me to be influential from that authentic position, was something I had to really think about consciously and relearn some behaviors. There are things and situations I find myself in today as a leader where I have to take a pause and think about what's my most authentic response in this situation, because sometimes you can find yourself doing things that aren't necessarily appropriate for who you are, but because you feel that you're needing to defend somebody or defend something else, or you're needing to get your voice across, doing that in a way that's still authentic to myself but still achieve the outcome I'm looking for has been a very difficult thing to work through. I'm fortunate that I can draw on an inner confidence. Imposter syndrome does bite hard sometimes.
I think it affects all of us, doesn't it?
It 100% does. And everyone has their own version of that, regardless of their background and who they are. But the imposter syndrome for me sometimes does mean I have times where I have to retreat and go again and just reset where I am. But that's been the journey. I passionately believe, regardless of who you are, everyone should be authentic in how they go about their life, and bringing authenticity into your work, whether that's through your values, whether that's through the way that you deal with your team, whether that's the way that you create your own voice, or you create a campaign, even from a marketing perspective, you're doing that, bringing part of yourself into it. I think it's important to create points of difference through that authenticity. And I spoke about personal brand earlier on, and marketers do need to do work on that. And to be honest with you, one way I managed to balance it is I managed to bring it into part of my personal brand, and I wasn't, and I haven't been, and I remain not wanting to hide from that fact. I've seen it as a key part of who I am, and that is part of the brand that I bring.
I really like that. What do you wish people understood or would do differently to help create a genuinely inclusive environment?
I think, we live in times where there's quite a divisive, I hate to use the word agenda. It's not necessarily that, but it's definitely a divisive time. And I think that what I wished that people would do, regardless of whether it's about trans issues, whether it's about things to do with different types of communities, or whether it's to do with people from different backgrounds, or whether they've got different learning disabilities, or whatever the issue may be, I think, showing up with empathy and showing up with a be kind principle to others is key, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to live the life that they want to lead, whatever that is and wherever they're coming from. Unfortunately, the world has got into a place where entrenched divisiveness is something that some people and some entities do like to create. And it's a minority, yes, but that minority does make life sometimes uncomfortable for others. So I just wish that they recognized some of the impact that they have on other people's lives on a day-to-day basis.
So I think that the key thing here is kindness and empathy. I think it doesn't matter who you are, what somebody's going through. I think if you approach every person that you come in contact with kindness and empathy, then the world would just be a better place. I mean, I know it's just quite a simple thing to say, but and it's a lot harder to do in certain situations. But I've got teenagers. Teenagers are horrible. They can be really unkind, and they don't think before they speak often. And all I say to my kids on a regular basis is, if nothing else, if you have nothing else to say or do, just be kind, because you don't know what somebody's going through and what demons they're fighting, or what kind of day they've come from or woken up from or going to. And I just often have this picture in my head, this road rage situation where people are raging at each other. You just don't know where somebody's coming from. And before you jump on top of somebody or you're unkind or judgmental, I think you've just always got to think, what's that person actually going through, and how can I be kind and sympathetic to that person's need? Does that sort of resonate with you?
It does. And I think, one thing we always have to acknowledge, and it's true, is that the human mind is programmed to be judgmental. It judges millions of times a day, even on very, very small things that we see and hear. So you won't necessarily stop people having judgments, because that will always happen. The key thing is people recognizing the impact that they have on other people is key. So, I mean, at the end of the day, understanding is obviously key. And you summarized it into empathy and kindness, and you're quite right. They're easy words to say, but they're not common across everything. And it relates to all issues, as I mentioned, whether it's to do with someone from a different community, or whether they are from a different religion, or whether from a different background, or whether they've got a learning disability or a mental health condition, or whatever that it might well be. Ultimately, it is important that everyone shows up to each other in a world that can only become a better place if everyone has that as their first principle, if you like. And I think we just need to do better as a culture of getting that message out there generally.
I want to touch on, you said, as humans, we are designed to judge and think all the time. My daughter's very conscious of herself and everything. And, we talk a lot about people judging everybody all the time. And this is why she won't do something and all the rest of it. And to judge is human, right? But I think something that we have to remember is that judgment is a fleeting thing, and it's a fleeting instinct, and it maybe lasts 3 or 4 seconds, and then that phase is gone, or could be gone. So it's maybe recognizing, okay, I've had a judgment point, okay, but let's move on, right? And let's try and understand why somebody might be different, or a situation might be a certain way. You can still go, ooh, but then equally go, oh, okay, cool, that's great, that's something different, let's move on and find the goodness in it. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think, you won't stop those milliseconds or 3 or 4 seconds, however long they last, of people doing that. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what happens. And, you know, as marketers, whole role in life professionally is really to tap into people's reactions, and part of their reaction is their judgment system.
Yeah.
And they'll judge language that we use in copy. They'll judge images that we use in ads. They'll use metaphors that you use across things. Equally, people engage in campaigns and they convert off landing pages or off order forms because how their brain perceives something in that moment. And I think we just have to recognize that the world does work in that way. That is how life is created. That's the construct of communication, the construct of the human species. And some of that's unwritten, some of that's unsaid, some of it is conscious and some of it is unconscious. But at the end of the day, that is how it works. We do need to recognize, and sometimes the solution is, as I was talking about myself earlier on, about showing it with authenticity at times. Sometimes it is about taking a pause and recognizing what's happening and seeing that what you're doing isn't necessarily the right thing for you or for the situation at that time.
Thank you for being so candid, and I hope people can take from that a deeper understanding, and and be kinder, and use sympathy and empathy when they're engaging with people of different setups and situations. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Coming back to a bit more of a marketing kind of question, and a bit more in line with what you do on a day-to-day. If your younger self had to walk into the room today, what would you say?
Wow, that's a deep one. If my younger self walked into the room today, what would I say? When I was young, I didn't believe I would be here today. So I think it would,
What's that? Why do you think you wouldn't be here today?
because I didn't think I fit into the world and I didn't want to be in the world at that time. So, but I'm here, I made it. And I think, I mean, I used the language about journey to impact earlier on for a Netflix series, but I think, it's been a journey. So I think what I'd have to say to my younger self is, look, you made it, you did it. So,
And maybe don't hold back, don't have so many self-doubts.
yeah, and I think you just have to. It is about, it's possible, you can find a way. Showing up is important in life generally, right? So I think in my case, just showing up has been part of my career, my success, my brand, my impact. And I think, as anybody in life, I would always give out the advice that be visible and show up. And I think I would just echo that advice to my younger self.
So again, back to what we spoke about earlier, being a bit more front of house, so to say, and not hiding behind the work.
Exactly.
Just a little bit of a sideline here. What are your thoughts about AI in marketing right now? What excites you about it, and what concerns you about it? It's quite an iffy topic at the moment in the marketing world and in the creative world.
It is. And I think, I think it's a massive opportunity for marketers, and I think we shouldn't be scared of it. If anything, the use case in marketing is one of the strongest use cases across businesses. So, from a CMO perspective, and for anybody that's in marketing, I think the message has to be that you need to think about and really learn and grasp the potential of AI, because it will not go away. We're here now. It's out of the box and the benefits are there to be had. And I do genuinely see it as a very, very positive thing. I think responsible use of it is key, and that's important. And, from a marketing perspective, though, I've always seen it as it's human in a loop rather than a replacement for the human. And I think it's really key that as marketers, it's really about how you use those tools and maximizing them to be more efficient, to be more creative, to look at things differently. I mean, I use AI loads. I've been working with it for more than a year. Experimented with lots of tools. One of the great things I personally get from AI is from a research perspective, an ideas perspective, the ability to save time and just work through things really quickly and to sharpen up anything I'm working on, or help me summarize content so that then I can really quickly think about how I can utilize that resource or understand a particular topic a lot faster. And that's been a big use case for me. But I think where it will be in 24 months' time, it's going to be difficult to predict. But I definitely believe the human in the loop piece is critical. And as a marketer, it's about thinking, okay, how do I stay inside this rather than I'm outside of this?
Mm.
How can I drive the use of this? And I think from a marketing perspective, the tools and the potential to play with AI is greater than it is in many other functions. So the other thing I would say is it's a great way of building your own personal brand or your visibility, because you can probably in marketing play with 10 times as many tools as there's other parts of businesses can do. And
And
just
they're fun.
being able and they're fun, and being able to help others understand what AI is and take that fear away
Yeah.
from them thinking about it. Because, there is a kind of like an awareness and acceptance kind of change thing going on with
Yeah.
AI for some people.
Yeah.
And I think we can help them through that. But marketing leaders need to really grasp hold of it quickly. It is a function that AI will play a bigger role in than many others. But the use cases is massive, whether that's data, whether that's content, whether that's research, whether that's campaign building, whether that's, helping you understand reports and pulling out trends and other things. There's so many use cases that you can apply for it. And I think as leaders, it's important we keep pushing our teams to be thinking about how they can be adopting AI in their roles. Part of the process for me has been about them just understanding and becoming aware and taking that fear away initially, and then just giving them a sense of, look, go play, go understand. Don't worry about it. Take out loads of free trials and just see what you can potentially do. Just take half an hour a week and just do something different. And I think it's an opportunity for marketers and for leaders to kind of be the baton holder and to run with it. Because if you choose not to do that, you'll be at the back of the race, not the front of the race.
I totally agree. And I think, the chatter online, especially amongst marketers and designers, AI is going to take our jobs, a bit like the machines are taking our jobs. Now it's the AI is going to take our jobs. And I firmly believe that everybody in all the teams should all, by standard, have Copilot and ChatGPT at least, as a bare minimum. Had you come across any AIs that you feel are imperative? Because you've said you've been working with them for a little while now. Any new ones that you feel have come to light that are amazing? Or, more of the traditional ones that are around that you use on a daily basis that you can advocate for?
There's a lot of edge cases that are around that have very shallow uses. So I'm always fascinated to see how they develop. One of the cases that I'm advocating a lot at the moment is just caution around AI. And I come back to what I started with around the concept of responsible AI. Because as marketers and as leaders and as anybody using AI generally, we need to be very mindful of the responsibility of the use of the tool. So just things like ChatGPT, if you're thinking about that, you need to be very mindful about that from a data security and a privacy perspective. There is a responsible AI problem with some use cases of ChatGPT. So I think the other thing about this is not just using AI, it's about advocating, informing and making people aware that they need to be very mindful about some of the risks that they need to be cautious with. So if you're thinking about, as I have with AI tools, giving AI tools data to look at to help you find trends, it's a brilliant use of AI, by the way. I love doing that and helping me stitch pieces of data together. It's a brilliant way of doing that too, whether that's campaign data or research data or whatever that might be. But be mindful that if there's privacy elements in that data, and you're not you've got cross-border data security. Don't stick that in ChatGPT if you're not in North America, for example. The one thing I would advocate is these things like, Claude is a great alternative for as a mainstream AI tool. So there's lots of things, but Claude is one to definitely explore if you're wanting to play with data and keep it within a data security, privacy, GDPR type framework. So it's that responsible AI thing that I keep banging the drum around a lot at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the concerns is, if you haven't got a proper license, ChatGPT, and you're pumping everything into there, that it could be open to whoever wants to see it. And I think a lot of people don't actually understand that, or they do, and they think, oh, it won't be that bad, or it's not really going to affect us. And the next thing, all that data's out there in the ether. But thank you. How do you balance being a strategic leader with being creatively brave?
I think this is a really big challenge for lots of marketers. Marketers are often, particularly those that are CMOs, are really programmed into making sure that they're being strategic and showing their impact and their value at a strategic level constantly. And that's right. That should be the case. But at the same time, it can put you in a place of being super safe, or it can put you in a place of being too data driven, which is a problem. Actually, data driven is a good thing, but if you're too data driven, it's a bad thing. And equally, things like being beholden constantly to attribution in campaigns can be a box that will stop you thinking creatively, because you're always thinking about, reducing that cost per sale, cost per lead. You're thinking about improving that percentage point on a conversion rate in a campaign. And therefore, that's not about creativity. That's just about loads and loads of iterative thinking. That's not true creativity. Iterative thinking is a mile apart from creativity, true creativity, at least. The difference is, and this is the part I love about my job, I love the fact that I get to do stuff like a 2-year-old every single day, in that I can choose sometimes to go into a playroom and play with data and really deep dive onto that and find a story in that data, and that'll be my happy place for that day. But then the next day, it will be about working on how can we tell this creative brand or product campaign and turn that into an amazing story in a way that no one's ever done that before, so we can then start showing that up on collateral in digital and in print and in other forms of our campaigns. And how can we then move from there and translate that into a conversation with someone in a product or a research role, thinking about the next 3 years in the future, not about today. It's about where we'll be in 3 years and how do we get there and what do we need to be ready for in 3 years' time. And that's the great thing about being a CMO, is that you get to use the whole of your brain. And it's not something that many other jobs or other roles really allow you to do. And I just see it as a kind of like childlike expression of playing. So that's how I balance it. It's about having the perception of seeing it in that way, but equally being super cautious that in order to keep some people happy, you need to be strategic. But in order to make an impact and to move the needle and to stand out, you need to be massively creative. Just thinking about, okay, what's my purpose today? What am I trying to achieve? And going back to that first principles operating sense that I was talking about earlier on with many things is a really great place to come at things from. And, I couldn't do. There's very few jobs in the world that can keep me happy from an entrepreneurial flair perspective other than being a CMO, because any other job I would be constrained and only using part of my brain. And I just love the fact I get to use that massive spectrum of skill. And I'm blessed to be able to do that. I'm fortunate to be able to do that. And I really enjoy doing that.
I think as a CMO, I almost feel it's maybe as important as a CEO, because I feel like CMOs generally almost drive the CEO into, the CEO's got an idea of how they'd like the business to go, but I feel like the CMO's really got the numbers and the data and has done all the testing and knows what works well in the market and what doesn't. And I think the one way you do that is through creativity and play and testing, right? I'm a big advocate for testing outside of the box and trying different things and knowing what doesn't work. And I feel like if you aren't creative in testing, you never know what doesn't work and what does work. It really resonates with me in terms of what you're saying about entrepreneurship, because you might not be the CEO, but you definitely helping shape how the business is presented and run in terms of how the money comes in ultimately at the end of the day.
The role of a CMO is a storyteller. You're storytelling with data, you're storytelling with creativity, you're storytelling with campaigns, whatever you're doing, content. Let's not lose sight of the fact that a CMO is also a storyteller inside a business, not just externally. Brand needs to communicate its purpose and mission. And good CMOs are able to really translate that inside a business as a commercial lever to build culture, to have an impact on the employee value proposition, and to make people feel great about working there. At the end of the day, a business is only as good as the people that work for it. So a CMO's role, cultural perspective, is critical because it'll allow you to retain great talent and attract great talent to that culture. As a CMO, your ability to communicate the purpose and mission of that business into day-to-day level activity for everyone, so they feel part of that mission, they feel part of the purpose that everyone is there within that organization to work for, is such a key thing. And some CMOs lose sight of that internal lens. They get so obsessed about focusing about, I should be making a campaign and getting things through the door or selling stuff. But actually, all of those things are true. But the piece you shouldn't lose sight of is the importance that you have in supporting the CEO on that internal piece. And yeah, there's a crossover there with people teams and HR teams, and they're a critical friend in that process. But the message and the translation of that purpose and mission and brand and strategic vision has to come from the CMO, because at the end of the day, you're the best storyteller in the business, and therefore your skills need to be in that place.
And I think that really helps everybody pull together, doesn't it? It brings everybody together on one joint story. I've worked in businesses where the internal story wasn't very good, and everybody had a very different story externally to business or to how they communicated to friends and family. And equally, I've worked in businesses where that internal story was very clear. This is what we stand for. This is what we do. This is who we are. Here's our logo. These are our colors. And it really brings everybody together quite nicely. So that, I really agree with you on that. That internal story, I think, is quite key and pivotal. I think that is often missed.
I think people understanding the impact and value that they bring in every role in the business onto the market, to the customer, regardless of their role, can only come if you've told that story really well inside. Because otherwise people just feel disconnected from the customer.
What would you like to be remembered for, not professionally, but personally?
I would like to be remembered that I made a difference, would be my number one thing. That I used my voice for the good of people, of society, that I had an impact there, and that I built stuff, and this is the kind of engineer in me that kind of sits at the heart, that I built teams, I built brands, I helped people grow personally and professionally, and I executed on stuff that just made things work, and that it smashed a hole in society for the good.
I like that. That builder and almost legacy lever, so that there's something behind for the good, and you've changed the world, like even if you're not around, but it's almost easier for the next generation that comes along. You've put those building blocks in place. And that leads me on to my next question, actually. If you had to leave one sticky note message for the next generation of marketers, what would it be? And where would you leave it?
What I would love to put on my sticky note would be something like be heard, use your voice, amplify your value, and show up. That would be on my sticky note. Where I would leave it, I think, would be if we assume that it was in an office, I think I would leave it in a place where everyone made their tea and coffee or got their refreshments, because I think at those moments, that's when marketers and other people need those reminders. It's a reflective point. You're taking a break, just to have something to make a difference at that time, in that moment, to give people a perk and to go again and kind of be present is the time. So I think it would have to be on a kettle somewhere where teams come together.
I was going to say in the cupboard, but a kettle I think is much better. Well, thank you. That was my last question to you, in terms of those kind of questions. But the most important question here is, do you have any funky shoes you want to show us?
Well, I do have a lot of funky shoes. So when you asked me this question, I had trouble deciding. These are
Oh,
the
those are
sort of
cool.
things that I'm very used to. I'm very, very well known for wearing. I spoke earlier on about shoes that stand out, shoes that have impact, and like the hero of the things that I very much have made shoes part of my personal brand. It's the one thing that people look for. Those shoes are shoes that I've worn a couple of key times in my recent career. At events and on stages a few times, and they always become a bit of a talking point. I equally know they're super cool, and
Did you get the
I
teenage thumbs up on them?
teenage thumbs up. I think everybody. I even had at an event not long ago when I was wearing them. I had a guy come up to me who was probably 50, 60-year old. He was from the northwest of England. He was not the typical person I was expecting to come up to me with something and talk about my shoes. He was probably someone that I would have imagined would have stayed at the back of the room in something like this. But he made an absolute beeline and he just had to tell me. And just hearing it from someone with a broad Scouse accent that was 50, nearly 60 years old, with a beard and not much hair, just kind of come out and just point and go, those are damn cool, in a Scouse accent, of course. It was just great. So I think shoes are a talking point. I think generally they're good things for leaders to use. And I think also we all know that there's a powerful analogy around shoes from an empathy perspective and being, walking in other people's shoes, or, if you were in other people's shoes. So I think it's also just quite important sometimes to think about as a metaphor about if I were in their shoes, how would I feel? How would I react? How would I be in these circumstances? So I think the shoes thing is really powerful.
Are
But
they
yeah, they're my,
are they a particular brand?
oh, they're a brand I've got several from there. They're a brand called Embassy London.
Embassy London. Okay, so we have to give a shout out to Embassy London. Do you have any other Embassy London ones there that you want to show off?
Not with me right now, no, but I do have a number of other pairs of Embassy London shoes and heels and boots and other things. But they're not the only brand I do like, but I do like the fact that they're funky, they're cool, they stand out, they're colourful.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you. That was a great way to end the show. And thank you so much for sharing your shoes with us. And that was it. Thank you, Lee, for joining. And I hope to be chatting to you soon again in the future.
Thank you, Tanya, for having me. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, what a session today. I was really honored to have Lee Gilbert on the show today, dropping truth bombs, answering big questions, and more than a few mic drop moments, and what it means to lead with clarity and live with purpose. What I've learned from my conversation with Lee today is this: leadership isn't about being loud, it's about being real. Marketing isn't just about reach, it's about being seen with honesty and intention. And personal branding, empathy, and creativity, they're not nice to haves, they're must haves. It's essential if you want to get ahead today. Lee reminds me that visibility isn't vanity, it's part of taking up space, owning your story, and not just standing out, but standing true to who you are. If this episode resonated with you, hit follow, leave a review, or share it with somebody that you feel might need to hear this. If you're a CMO with a story to tell or a brand that believes in meaningful conversations, get in touch. I'm Tanya Kent, and this is Shoes of a CMO. And remember, you don't need permission to be seen, just the courage to step forward. See you on the next one.